Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer in that order. Welcome everyone, question and answer time, part 2 of 3. Let's do it. We'll start with one sent in by Steve, who wrote, will there be another Price is Right featuring the Texas Snowman? Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy wants to come on the show again. We're going to have him on a bunch of times, I'm sure, in the future. We actually have 2 other people we're considering to have him sort of do his next battle with me hosting, so that's in the works. John wrote, I noticed in the past you've used multiple consigners. Could you detail the pros of using the various consigners or selling platforms you use, like ComC or eBay Consignment Services like Hoodies or Greg Morris? Yeah, so that would take a really long time to sort of go through the pros and cons of each, but I think I use 6 consignment companies regularly now, and a couple others for like specialty items. It's really good to sort of know the strengths and weaknesses of each. I'll give a few of them here. The 3 you mentioned are certainly 3 of my favorites: ComC, Greg Morris, and Hoodies. Those are all in my standard rotation of 6, we'll say. And full disclosure, Hoodies and Greg Morris have been channel sponsors in the past. They are not currently, but they have been in the past. ComC is probably my number 1 consignment company of all. They're the only company that allows, that's a vault service for cheaper grit cards or ungraded cards. You can send them, if you have a $10 card you want to sell, but you don't want to auction it because it might end up going for $2 or something, you can send it to them and price it at whatever you want. And you can sort of build your own store in your ComC account. I like that a lot. Greg Morris is absolutely the best company out there for vintage, in my opinion. They're one of the top vintage selling companies in the world. I use them both to buy and sell all the time. There is a major limitation with Greg Morris in that you have to have $5,000 worth of cards to send them a consignment order. So that's sort of limiting in the sense, you can't just send them like $100 worth of cards. You have to sort of accumulate till you have a lot, and then you can send it all in one order. But for vintage, they're my go-to for raw vintage especially, but also graded vintage as well. And Hoodies, I love sending them modern singles. They get stuff listed really, really fast. Customer service, all that stuff's great, and they got a lot of eyeballs on their auctions. And you can follow along on eBay. All these companies, you can follow along the auctions as you go. It's really nice. So yeah, those are 3 of the positives of those 3 in particular. Iced Full Moon asked 3 questions. First, which grading company did you start off with as a beginner, or would you recommend for a beginner? Second, which era or sports, in your opinion, are hot or not? Who's more popular in 2023, the modern or the vintage? And third is, for now, have you ever caught a Pokemon? So yeah, when I first started off, I just started off with PSA. I don't really know why or remember why. I'm sure it was just the biggest company out there when I started, and that's basically worked out. If I was sort of recommending for a beginner which company to use, I would say all 4 of the major companies are solid options and have something to offer. I would say it's really up to you. What's important to you? If turnaround time is really important to you, look at SGC. If you really like the look of the CSG slabs, or I guess they're now CGC, go with CGC. If subgrades are super important, look at Beckett. If you just want to sell your cards immediately, probably PSA is the way to go. But so I would sort of tell you to do your own research and figure out which one works best for you. For your second question, what's hot or not, vintage versus modern, I don't really view them that way. Like, I don't see them as competing with each other. I see them, they're both their own entity, and they're sort of moving along at their own pace, and I don't view it as like one is hotter than the other right now. For the past 30 years, they've both moved along, like I said, sort of at their own pace, in tandem with each other, but not competing with each other. So I don't sort of view it that way. And in terms of have I ever caught a Pokemon, not yet, but it is on my bucket list. Iced Full Moon wrote, welcome back. Was it easier going or returning? And how do I identify a refractor? To this day, they all look like a rainbow to me. Laughing my butt off, I'm serious. Yeah, so I've actually always been very comfortable with change. I've moved around a lot in my life. I've actually lived in Europe multiple times. So the move to Europe and the move back were both very, very smooth. I mean, obviously there's like stresses involved around an international move, but for the most part, everything went really nice. For your second question, how do you determine a refractor? Most sets today, refractor sets, have refractors labeled on the back. I'll just show an example here. Most of them, somewhere on the card, it says refractor. So that's sort of one way that's sort of the easiest way. There are some sets that don't say this, and if you're looking at a non-refractor and a refractor version of the same card, it's very easy to determine which is the refractor. It's just the one that refracts the light, has the rainbow effect, whereas the non one is a lot more dull. The colors are duller and less sparkly, we'll say. But once you've started doing this a little bit, you'll quickly catch on, and it becomes very, very easy as long as you get more experience with it. Trailer Trash to Treasure asked, I sold an 89 Upper Deck Griffey KSA 10 and it was returned by eBay for item not as described when the card didn't cross over to a PSA 10. How is that even possible? The card was shipped from me directly to PSA and shipped directly back to me by PSA for not crossable grading. I didn't sell a PSA 10. I sold a KSA 10. eBay sellers beware. Yeah, no, I don't know, that situation doesn't, make a lot of sense. I don't know why a card would be shipped directly to PSA unless it was literally PSA buying it, which I doubt. So I'm not really sure what happened there. Perhaps, there was some glitch or, based on what I understand, what you're describing is not what eBay Authenticity Guarantee Program is there for and doesn't protect against. So that shouldn't have happened, really not sure. JD Mousley2314 asked, how far could you throw a watermelon from atop the Golden Gate Bridge? Are you going underhanded a la Rick Barry or more of a shot put style? Well, if it's one of those mini watermelons, definitely, football, throwing it football style. And I got a decent arm for a man of my age. If it's one of those really big watermelons, yeah, I'm probably going Rick Barry. I don't know that you could get enough of like a shot put thing going. Maybe. I'd probably try both, but if I had to pick one, I'd go Rick Barry. Ken wrote, in the PSA magazine, they describe what the criteria is for a grade 1 through 10, but I wonder if there is more to the thought process. For instance, it seems that if a card has centering off in both up and down and side-to-side directions, PSA takes off 2 points. Another example would be corners. If one corner is frayed versus 3 or 4 corners frayed, the deduction is 1 to 2 points off. Same thinking for edges. Maybe they secretly give each category a number rating and divide by the number of categories: centering, corners, edges, surface, color, and eye appeal. If you were to mind read a PSA grader during the process, what is your feeling for how they actually come up with a grade? Yeah, so I've definitely read that criteria. It's been a while, but I read those at one point, and I don't think that is, I don't think they use that at all. I think the criteria that's written on the website, I don't think it's up to date or anything. Last time I read it, I was like, this doesn't strike me as accurate at all. So I would ignore that. If I had to guess, what's going on, I don't think that they're breaking it down unless it's like a really, really expensive card. I think for the most part, they're just sort of taking a quick glance at it, 30 seconds, check out the front, 10 seconds, check out the back, just come up with an overall grade based on that. It would be my best guess as to what's going on, but I really, really don't know. Steve wrote, my question is about vintage baseball cards and how to price them. If a vintage baseball card, for example, a 1970s Nolan Ryan raw near mint condition card sells for $25 to $50, but graded it could sell anywhere between $100 and $200 depending on the grading service you use, do you use the raw number to figure out a price or the graded number since you're sending it out to get graded? So if you're asking me like as a buyer, what would I sort of value a card like that at in terms of what I'm going to pay? It's a raw card, so I have to value it like a raw card. Anyone who plays the grading game will tell you you cannot assume a card is going to grade a certain grade. If you do that, you're going to get burned way too often. So yeah, you have to value it like it's a raw card, which is what it is. If you're saying like you're going to sell the card in a store or something, what should you price it at? I mean, the fair thing to do is price it like a raw card. Again, it's a raw card. It's not a graded card. Now, a lot of sellers will price sort of higher grade vintage, factoring in the potential for grading and the chance of upside there, and that's certainly fair as well. It'll just it'll move slower if you price it that way. But so either one's fine, but it kind of depends on how quickly you want to move the card. Scott wrote, when it comes to grading submissions, I was curious if you had any advice or tips you can share on shipping services. Not so much the packaging itself, but more so navigating who to use for what type of cards, getting insurance, requiring a signature, etc. I've experimented with using both USPS and FedEx, each coming with their own pros and cons. Never tried UPS, I just think the options can be difficult to navigate. From knowing what type of insurance they offer to whether I'm overpaying, it's something that always turned out okay, but also something I've always second-guessed. FedEx had a weirdly low maximum that wasn't technically insurance, and UPS insurance options seemed somewhat inconsistent. So I always just use the United States Postal Service, USPS. I think I basically use them for everything. Once in a long while, I'll use FedEx, but not for shipping grading graded package. Like FedEx, I'll use if I'm like on the West Coast, I need to ship a large collection to the East Coast. Otherwise, USPS has always worked for me. I always use priority mail. I generally get signature confirmation. I don't think you actually need it, but I get it for some peace of mind. And I usually don't get insurance. I mean, I'll get it if it's like an important package or an expensive package, then yeah, I'll get insurance. But I don't think I've ever made an insurance claim with USPS, so that's a good sign that I've never needed it. I know a lot of people complain about them. I've always found them to be extremely reliable, so that's just what I've always used. Bob wrote, I know you're big into speculation and always giving your opinion on things like future value and upcoming trends. Haha. In your opinion, what are some of, if any, modern sets you could see being popular 10 to 20 years down the line? Example, some of the 2014 totally certified mirror parallels as like the next PMGs. Any unique products or sets you think are underappreciated in terms of design or meaning? Yeah, so the reason I don't like to make predictions on that sort of thing, like what modern sets will be worth a lot in the future, is because I literally don't know. It's not like I have some, some hunches and I don't feel like sharing it. I really don't know. I mean, if you had asked me in 2000 and what insert sets from the 90s were going to be worth a lot, 25 years from now, there's no way I would have picked PMGs or Star Rubies or, these were just regular old inserts back then. I mean, there were lots of other insert sets. I don't know why those shot to the top of the food chain here. I couldn't even figure that out. With vintage, you can look to the past and sort of see trends and then use that to sort of project into the future, and I think that works. Sometimes with specific players as well, but with like modern sets today, I have nothing to go off of, and I wouldn't really even try to make a guess on it. Andy asked a question about ComC or ComC. He asked, once they scan in all my cards, can I start selling them and they deduct the 50 cents per card at that time, or do I have to front all of the 50 cents per card before I can start selling any of them? So yeah, you do have to pay the 50 cents per card up front. That's their pricing structure, 50 cents per card up front plus 5% of the sale. If you've sent them a package and you don't have any money in your account, the cards will start coming into your account. You'll see them listed there, but you won't be able to list them for sale until you've paid for the 50 cents up front. Once you get the ball rolling, I generally have enough money in my account from sales in order to cover the 50 cents per card on any future packages I send them. But yeah, the first time I guess you do have to sort of front some cash to get the ball rolling. Next question was sent by Diago. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. He wrote, I'm in my late 30s and basically collected stickers since I was young. When I came to the U.S. in 2022, I became amazed by the sports card world and did spend a bit of, in the meantime, on 70s to 90s basketball and some soccer cards. I also amassed a big Panini Prizm 2020 collection. My question is, in Europe, given the import tariffs, how do you keep up with your hobby and your business? I get that you sell a lot through ComC and Greg Morse, but I guess you never get to see your cards, right? Are you staying there long term? From a few labeled boxes in one of your videos, I'm guessing you are somewhere in the Netherlands or Belgium. Oh yeah, so I lived in the Netherlands for 4 years. I actually just moved back to the States less than a month ago. And yeah, it was tough operating a sports card business from there. Just not a lot of a sports card market in the Netherlands or in most parts of Europe. But I traveled to the States regularly. I came quite often, and I would do all my sports card business here in the States, do all my buying here, and I would ship things off to various consignment companies, including ComC and Greg Morse and things like that. I took some cards back to the Netherlands, not many, but more like the lots that I could sell myself on eBay from there. Next question was sent in by Michael, who wrote, is there too much emphasis on specific grades? For example, a 6 always seems to be more valuable than a 4, and a 7 more valuable than a 5, but there have been instances where the lower and mid grades actually have strong eye appeal and good centering. The difference right now between grades in market value is quite substantial. Will there be some sort of market correction with cards in low and mid grade actually doing pretty well then, if they do have great overall presentation? Oh yeah, it's a good question, and it's sort of the famous, buy the card, not the grade statement, which a lot of people preach, but I don't think very many people actually follow. If you were saying, I don't know that I would necessarily predict that that's going to be like a big shift in the hobby. We might see slow, gradual change in that direction. I think we are seeing a little bit of that as there's third-party graders now. There's like fourth-party graders where people give their opinion on top of the card's grade. So it is getting more and more important, and as people get more and more educated with eye appeal and card conditions and things like that, maybe it will go a little bit in that direction where eye appeal will play a bigger part than the actual grade. But I wouldn't say I would predict there's going to be a big shift that way, as grading has been around 20 plus years. It's been a strong part of the hobby for 20 plus years. It's been around for over 30 years, and we haven't really seen much of a shift in that towards that direction at this point. I feel like if that was coming, we would have already seen it, but maybe slowly but gradually. Next was sent in by Keith, who wrote, I got back into collecting in early 2022. I still don't totally get the price difference between PSA 9s and 10s. After watching numerous videos, reading forums posts, and reading Discord discussions, the opinion seems split almost down the middle, and rarely does anyone ever talk about a case-by-case basis. For modern base cards or other high pop cards, I get it, but using the example of a gold out of 50 for a GOAT player, it seems like 9s are a great way to go. Many of the golds I seek have a total of 10 to 20 cards graded. This will go up some over time, but it's likely they will never exceed 40. This notion that 9s won't retain or grow in value seems absurd. Any thoughts? Oh yeah, I basically agree with your assessment. If you're talking about like a high pop counted card, with a ton of 10s out there and a ton of 9s out there, yeah, in the long run that card's probably going to go down because it's simple supply and demand. There's too many out there, and the 9s are just going to drop in value. But if you're talking about like a rare card with a low pop count, a key rookie or a key card of a significant player, yeah, and it's got a low pop count and a 9, the supply and demand, rule doesn't come into play here. That's still going to be more demand than supply for that card. So that card has a chance to grow in the long term if other factors pan out. This one's sent by Jeremy, who wrote, I've always been interested in cards of common players where a major star had a cameo in the photo, and recently learned that there's a name for these shadow cards and a market for them too. I guess you could say I was quote unquote in the dark about their popularity. I've noticed that some sellers are starting to take advantage and sell what would otherwise be a worthless card for much more because of a cameo. Do you think this is right? Do you see the value of these going up or down in the future? If you were a major star athlete and could have a cameo on any common player's card, whose card would you choose? And is a hot dog a sandwich? So, is a hot dog a sandwich? I mean, no, it's a hot dog. So, regarding cameo cards, yeah, there's been a slight bump in values over the last few years, really since the price boom. I'm not really sure why, but not sure what you mean by like sellers taking advantage of it. I mean, I think sellers are selling some of the cards as they've increased in value. I don't have a problem with that, or I don't know if you mean something more specific than that, but predicting whether they would go up in value, I mean, I wouldn't predict that for sure. I mean, again, anytime I'm like predicting anything into the future, it's always based on past results, long-term past results, and sort of seeing if there's a trend that leads me to believe the trend will continue, and I don't see that trend with cameo cards long-term at all. So, next one was sent in by Shane, who wrote, I'm a new collector on a limited budget. Should I buy a 10 graded paper card or a 9 graded chrome card? Also, should I buy a 9 PSA or a 10/9.5 from one of the other grading companies? My question is more regarded to investing than collecting. So these are good questions for a newer collector to be asking, but I would say they're not really questions for someone else to answer for you. They're questions you should ask and answer yourself. I mean, from a collecting standpoint, and I know you said it was an investing question, but from a collecting standpoint, do you want the Chrome 9 or the Paper 10? That's a matter of personal preference, and either answer is perfectly fine, whatever you prefer. From a purely investing standpoint, there aren't like blanket rules that you can just apply to all cards. It doesn't work that way. It's much more nuanced and complex, and I would need a lot more information to be able to advise on, what's the better investment card. Most specifically, what card are you talking about? That's going to matter. The pop count on that is going to change everything. What are your investing goals? Are you looking to invest short-term, medium-term, long-term? That might change the answer. How much risk are you willing to take on? Are you willing to lose all your money? There's a lot of other questions. What grading companies are you even referring to? Just a lot more to it, and it's a case-by-case basis. There aren't blanket rules. There's not like a investing guidebook that you can, check things off and figure out which card to invest in. Learning to invest is really, I think, sort of something you learn as you go, and you get better at as you go. And I think it's important to try it yourself, make mistakes, figure out things that work and sort of learn that way. This was sent by Sean, who wrote, in 2020, I decided to try putting together a different kind of set, the 2020 Bowman Draft Picks and Prospects Autograph Refractors. I've been working on it for 3 years, but cannot find a reliable checklist. I keep finding cards that are not on any available checklist. On my Excel list, I'm showing 119 CDA cards and 98 CPA cards. The 2020 Major League Baseball draft list is only 160 players long, so I'm assuming Bowman has made cards for prospects not in the draft. Is there some website or database I'm not aware of for an accurate checklist? So I'm actually not familiar with that set at all. If anyone watching knows a lot about that set or the checklist, please leave it in the comments and I'll pass it along. But I would say go to Beckett.com. They generally have checklists of every card ever made, and you can play with the sort features and figure out, exactly the checklist you're looking for. Yeah, Beckett.com. And this one was sent by Mike, who wrote, I was wondering what you think of channels that talk about how much cards have dropped in price. Do you think these posts are good for the hobby? Is it a reality check or somebody's profiting off of other people's losses? There are a lot of videos, but I'm specifically referring to PSA Collector. He has 73,000 subscribers. So I actually don't know the specific video you're referring to. The sports card content I consume on YouTube is the very sort of educational stuff, probably stuff that most people find quite boring. But, I'd say the YouTube sports card space, there's a lot of room in here for a lot of different opinions, and there should be a lot of different opinions. I'm based on everyone's different viewpoint. I've been in the hobby 30 years. I've turned it into my career. I've made a living doing it. I absolutely love it. I want to do it as a career for the rest of my life. So I'm going to tend to have, I'm going to tend to want to show more good about the hobby than bad. That's just based on my experience. But there's also going to be people who I'm sure entered the hobby 2.5 years ago, lost a ton of money, are very bitter about it. And those are very real experiences too. My experience isn't the one and only true correct experience. So I think it's not really my place to sort of tell somebody what content they should put out and what their experience in the hobby should be. But that's it for round 2 here of question and answers. Thank you everyone, as always, for submitting all your questions. There'll be one more, like I said, a week from today will be part 3 of the, I guess this is like a mini 3-part question and answer series. See you all again then. Thanks, everyone.